Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and these are my running back and wide receiver rankings for week 10, and we're combining them into one video. My flex rankings, the top 100 at both positions. So if you are new to the channel, this video is only 2 weeks old, so we're still tinkering with it. We're still figuring it out, but I like it. I thought it worked pretty well last week, and especially with all of the injury updates that come in on Friday with all the practice reps, I don't have to update my position as much on Saturday. So let's get going. We're going to talk about the injuries at running back first, and then we'll break down the matchups. Overall, not that much has changed. We do have Trey Benson still on IR in Arizona. James Cook will play, but on Wednesday, he did not practice with an ankle injury. He was limited on Thursday, but then full on Friday. He's good to go. Same situation with Rico Dowdle. Did not practice Wednesday with a quad injury, but by Friday, he's good to go. No concern there. And then interesting situation with DeAndre Swift. He was limited on Wednesday. Last week he didn't play at all. And then on Thursday he was full in practice, so assumed he'd be active. And then on Friday didn't practice with a groin/personal situation going on. So it sounds like they expect him to play, but obviously need to make sure. We will know for sure on Sunday, but I assume Swift will be on the field. Quinshon Judkins is good to go. He was full in practice all week long, but before the bye did suffer a shoulder injury, so he's all right. Nick Chubb limited this week with a foot injury. I think he'll be all right. Ollie Gordon also limited this week with an ankle injury, but I assume he'll be good to go. Aaron Jones did not practice Wednesday, but was limited Thursday and Friday with a shoulder and toe injury. I think he will be all right. Ramondre Stevenson has been ruled out. He did not practice at all this week with that toe injury, so not going to play. And then Alvin Kamara has been dealing with an ankle injury for a while. He was limited all week in practice. I assume he'll be fine. But thankfully, Saquon Barkley is active, full in practice on Thursday and Friday with his groin injury, so he's all right. And then lastly, Bucky Irving not going to play, didn't practice at all. He was ruled out early in the week. So that's it for all of the injuries at the position. Let's move on to the matchups for running backs. And this chart is what I show you every single week. All of the matchups, how many points per game they've allowed to running backs on the season. Those are the stats in blue, and then in red, just for some recency bias, the last 4 games. Some teams are getting better at defending the run. Some are getting much worse. Sometimes a team can get injured and all of a sudden they become a good matchup. So let's run through the gauntlet. Sadly, 3 of the top 4 matchups for running backs are on bye. We have Cincinnati ranking number 1, so they're off the slate. Tennessee ranking number 2. They're off the slate. And especially with the 4th best matchup, Dallas, also on bye, I would consider this Giants matchup for the Bears running backs by far the best you could find. So light up Swift and Monangai. As long as Swift is healthy, I still trust him, and Monangai should be involved regardless of Swift's status. The matchup's very good. In the last 4 games, the Giants have allowed the 3rd most fantasy points to the position, 28.9, up from 25 on the year. And then Baltimore has been a good matchup on the year, but if you look more closely in the last 4 games, they've gotten more desperate. Their defense has stepped up. It's become a difficult matchup on the ground against Baltimore. So ranks top 5, but really it's bottom 10. Lately, I do not trust running backs going up against Baltimore. So Jordan Mason, Aaron Jones, not as safe as you might think. James Cook against Miami, he's good to go. He will play. And this Dolphins matchup is phenomenal. So he'll be fine. Definitely starting James Cook with confidence against the Dolphins. And in the same game, Davante should be just as good. The Bills have also been a bad run defense this year. It should be easy for Davante. The next matchup goes to Josh Jacobs against Philadelphia, but off the bye, they might right some of their issues. They did address the defensive line with some trades, so perhaps I don't know if this matchup is as easy. But Jacobs is a lock for a touchdown, so always going to start him. On paper, he gets a top 10 matchup. And then lately, the Falcons have been a top 2 matchup on the ground. Last 4 games allowing 29.1 points per game. On the year, they were tough to start, so they still only ranked number 9. But against Jonathan Taylor, he definitely gets the green light. Next matchup, though, is Chicago, who is on par with the Falcons in terms of points per game allowed this season. But in the last month, it could not be more different. Down to 14.1 points per game. That's less than half of what the Falcons are giving up in the last month. So maybe you trust the combination of Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary. But after last week, I don't know why you would. It is a big time split, and the matchup is looking gross, so I would downgrade them for sure. Not going to start a Giants running back against Chicago. But weather's a factor in this game. Maybe game script will force their hand. Perhaps the volume will go up because they just can't throw it in the bad wind in Chicago. The Jets matchup has been top 12 on the season, so Quinshon Judkins gets an upgrade. And then with the Quinnen Williams trade, the Jets fire sale on defense, I would assume this matchup is even better. So definitely start Quinshon Judkins. He is fully healthy off the bye. Rico Dowdle gets a top 12 matchup as well against New Orleans, so he should be phenomenal. I'll definitely start him, but Chuba Hubbard looks to be lost in the weeds, so not going to trust Chuba. I will endorse Rico against the Saints. TreVeyon Henderson and Terrell Jennings will get the start with no Ramondre against Tampa Bay. This matchup has been pretty good, especially as of late, up to 23.4 points per game allowed in the last 4. Off the bye, they might really clamp down. Last season, the Bucs' run defense was elite. This year, they're kind of reeling. However, they have given up touchdowns and especially a lot of usage in the passing game. So I think Henderson will be all right, but Terrell needs a vulture touchdown. I don't think I trust him against the Bucs. But Las Vegas was not actually a good matchup, so the Raiders did wake up. RJ Harvey and Dobbins were pretty ass against the Raiders last night. And then San Francisco has been an average matchup all year, so Kyren Williams should play well. He actually dominates against the Niners. We'll get into his stats later, but he is phenomenal in this spot. Always plays well against San Francisco. Jahmyr Gibbs and Dave Montgomery get a solid average matchup against Washington, so no worries there. Arizona, a decent matchup, getting a little tougher, though, against Seattle, so Charbonnet and Walker, a little bit of a dice roll. We'll see what happens with them, but not going to downgrade them too much against Arizona. Jaylen Warren and Kenny Gainwell get a hard matchup to predict. Sometimes the Chargers are elite at stopping the run, and then other times they are the most vulnerable defense in the league. So a bit of a wishy-washy matchup. I don't know if I trust Warren more than I usually do against LA. The Carolina Panthers have been somewhat tough on the season, so Alvin Kamara, not expecting a great game from him. He's been asked this year, but actually plays really well, does get up for the Panthers matchup. We'll get into his stats later on. Next matchup to mention is Minnesota, and now we're definitely in the downgrade territory. I think moving forward, all these matchups are bad ones. And this one goes to Derrick Henry. It's been tougher as of late, down to less than 16 points, but Henry has been getting good yardage lately. I think he'll be all right. Travis Etienne gets a somewhat difficult matchup against Houston, but he does play solidly against them in division. I think he'll be all right. The volume should be on lock with no Brian Thomas Jr. And then Kimani Vidal, hard to trust. The Steelers really shut down Jonathan Taylor last week, so I would downgrade him, not upgrade him against Pittsburgh. Indianapolis, a tough matchup on the season for Bijan Robinson, but he's matchup proof, so who cares? Denver, a tough spot for Ashton Jeanty, but his touchdown did save you. And then Seattle is somewhat tough. It's kind of tougher just to know who's the guy to start in Arizona. Do you really trust DeMarcado after last week? I'm just hoping Benson comes back in week 11. The Chiefs are on bye, so a tough matchup is irrelevant. Next tough matchup is Jacksonville, so Woody Marks and Nick Chubb, not going to trust them. Saquon gets a tough matchup against Green Bay, but I think off the bye, he will play well. Maybe that's just projecting, though. He's been kind of bad this season. And then Rachaad White gets a big downgrade, but volume probably going to carry him. The Patriots are really vulnerable, though, at stopping the pass, catching running backs. I think Rachaad can do some damage in the passing game. JCM and Chris Rodriguez get the toughest matchup in the last month against Detroit. It's been bottom 3 all year, so not trusting that committee at all. And then Breece Hall against Cleveland, a brutal matchup. No thank you, just a flex play. And then lastly, Christian McCaffrey gets the toughest matchup on the season, but is the only running back to actually score on them and is still matchup proof. I would still trust Christian McCaffrey. So that's it for all of the running back matchups. Let's move on to the wide receiver news and updates. Let's run through some injuries because there's actually quite a few that are relevant at wide receiver. I'm just going to go in alphabetical order by team. So let's start in Arizona with Zay Jones, who was limited all week in practice. It looks like Michael Wilson is the number 2 for Brissett. And then in Buffalo, Josh Palmer might come back to the lineup. He was limited all week in practice, so I think he'll be back on the field. In Chicago, Rome Odunze didn't practice Wednesday with an ankle and heel injury, but then was limited Thursday, full on Friday, and is good to go. And then the same practice reps were the case for DJ Moore, dealing with a hip and groin injury. Didn't practice Wednesday, but was full by Friday. DJ Moore, I would trust. Luther Burden expected to come back off his concussion. He was full Wednesday and Thursday, so another mouth to feed in Chicago. In Cleveland, Cedric Tillman has been practicing. He's looking to be coming back off IR with a hamstring injury. Full in practice, expected to play on Sunday. But Isaiah Bond did not practice at all. I think Tillman will just be taking his place. In their offense as well, Harold Fannin, the tight end, is questionable. A game-time decision. Did not practice Thursday with a hamstring injury. So that could open the door at wide receiver in Cleveland. But then in Green Bay, Matthew Golden limited with a shoulder injury. I think he'll play, but same goes for Christian Watson, limited with a knee injury. I think he'll play. I'd rather have Christian Watson. And then in Houston, it looks like CJ Stroud is officially out with his concussion, but I do think Davis Mills will play well. And then in Jacksonville, Brian Thomas Jr. is out. Did not practice at all this week and is not going to suit up. That's the main reason why they traded for Jakobi Meyers. We know Travis Hunter's been out. BTJ, not going to suit up either against Houston. Kayshon Boutte in New England is not going to play either. Didn't practice at all this week, so he's ruled out. And then in the Jets offense, Josh Reynolds was placed on IR. Maybe that's why they traded for A.D. Mitchell. But Garrett Wilson, limited in practice all week long, I think will come back. He's been out since his knee injury in week 6. I think he'll play in week 10. In Philadelphia, A.J. Brown was full in practice, so he's good to go. In Seattle, Cooper Kupp came back to practice on Thursday, but limited with a hamstring and heel injury. I don't think Cooper Kupp is safe at all. However, it looks like maybe Shaheed might be legit because Torrey Horton is doubtful, did not practice Thursday, went down with a groin and shin injury after being full on Wednesday. So not expecting Horton to play. He was good last week, but now not going to suit up. He's banged up. And then in San Francisco, it looks like Brock Purdy is going to be a game time decision. I don't know if it's Mac Jones or him, but Ricky Pearsall remains out, did not practice this week. In Tampa Bay, Chris Godwin with a leg injury did not practice either. He's not going to play. So Tez Johnson is the next man up. And then in Washington, Terry McLaurin, not expected to play, did not practice at all this week with a quad injury. He is not healthy. In Carolina, Ted McMillan, questionable, but is expected to play. And then lastly, in Jacksonville again, De'Ami Brown dealing with a concussion, was limited Wednesday, full on Thursday. I assume he'll be cleared from the protocol. But as always, got to make sure concussions are not linear. So that's it for the injury news at wide receiver. Now let's move on to the matchup stats. And just like running back, this graph shows you the exact same thing, just geared towards the wide receiver position. In blue, we have the season-long stats, how many points per game these defenses are allowing on the year. But in red, just the last month, just those last 4 games, and some defenses are getting a bit better. Some that were terrible are starting to get better. So let's run through the gauntlet. Let's show you the best and the worst matchups. And similar to running back, 2 of the top 5 matchups are on bye. So some good matchups we usually exploit and take advantage of cannot be exploited this week. Sadly, the Cowboys, the best matchup this season, are on bye. So that is unfortunate, but only happens 1 week of the year, so we can tolerate it. Number 2 matchup is the best this week, and that's going to the Chargers wideouts. Pittsburgh has a terrible secondary this season. So 36 points in the last month, very good spot. Over the year, it's been the second best matchup overall. So last week we saw Pittman and Pierce go over 100 yards. Downs also had a good game with a touchdown. I think Ladd, Keenan, and QJ are safer plays, but Quentin Johnston always a bit random, probably only trusting Ladd and Keenan. Third best matchup on the year is Washington, which goes to Detroit this week. So Amon-Ra, J-Mo, and Isaac Tesla should have a good game. Last week, Darnold threw some big house calls, and the Commanders just lost Marshawn Lattimore. There is really no red flag at all against Washington. Third best matchup this week is the 4th best on the season. Chicago is a good spot. So WanDale Robinson and Darius Slayton of the Giants should play well. Weather's a big factor in this game, though. It's going to be very cold. Might be snowing if the precipitation lasts into the afternoon. But at the very least, it's going to be under 40 degrees and pretty windy. I don't know if that's the best game script for throwing the ball, but on paper, you want this Bears matchup. Perhaps the Windy City could be a problem, but in general, WanDale and Slayton should be safer starts in this game. Tennessee is a top 5 matchup, but they are on bye, so sadly, that's irrelevant this week. And then the next best matchup is a bit of a different tier than those top 5. Baltimore is still pretty good, not just on the season, but still in the last month. Their secondary has not gotten right. As they've gotten better against the run, Baltimore is still a good spot for Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison. But not sure I trust both of them with J.J. McCarthy. I kind of just only trust Justin Jefferson. And then last night I was fooled. I endorsed Cortland Sutton pretty big time. And then Franklin was a good flex play because he scored a touchdown. But the Raiders matchup was good this year. I was wrong on Cortland Sutton, though. Detroit is a good matchup, especially even better in the last month, up to 33.6 points per game allowed. So Deebo Samuel should play well, but with Mariota and his injuries, it's kind of hard to bet on. Jalen Lane, I think, is the next man up with no Terry McLaurin. The Colts have been a good matchup this season, so maybe I still trust it, but with Sauce Gardner coming into the fold, it's definitely a downgrade for London straight up, and maybe Mooney does capitalize, but in general, the Colts secondary had been a weakness. No wonder they traded 2 first-rounders to get Sauce Gardner. Next matchup is the Giants, which is a good one for the Bears wide receivers. So Rome Odunze off the bagel should play better. DJ Moore probably worth trusting. And then with Luther Burden and Olamide Zaccheaus, that's kind of a really tough gamble to bet on. So only going to trust Odunze and DJ Moore, but who knows? Maybe this matchup is pretty good for all 4 of them. And then in Jacksonville, that's been a very good matchup all season. Top 12 on the year, pretty consistent stats. And Nico Collins does torch them. Nico plays very well, and I would trust Davis Mills to have a good game. The Jags secondary has been pretty ass all year. So Nico gets an upgrade. So does Christian Kirk, Jalen Noel, and Jaden Higgins. But I'm not sure I'm trusting the backup receivers in Houston. In San Francisco, that's a good spot. So Puka and Adams are pretty safe plays. I don't trust the 3rd string wide receiver, though. In LA, the Rams also a good matchup this season. So Jauan Jennings and Kendrick Bourne should have a solid game, but I don't really trust Bourne anymore. His breakout game was against the Rams, so maybe he does it again, but I don't really trust anyone other than Jauan, CMC, and Kittle. In New Orleans, they've been getting better lately in terms of matchups, so maybe you trust Tedero, McMillan, Leggett, or Coker, but in general, they're just floor plays. This team is pivoting in favor of Rico Dowdle a lot more lately, so not dying to trust them. Cleveland, a pretty neutral matchup for Garrett Wilson and A.D. Mitchell, so I'd trust Garrett Wilson. We'll see on A.D. Mitchell. New England has been neutral overall this year, but there is one tough matchup regarding Christian Gonzalez, but last week Drake London still torched them, so Egbuka should probably be fine. Tez Johnson and Sterling Shepard, maybe not the best upgrade for them. The Bengals have been neutral this season. Much easier to run on them and to use the tight end position, but they're on bye, so who cares this week? Green Bay has been a good matchup on the season, but a little more neutral as of late. So the Eagles receivers, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, should be fine. No downgrade here. They're not getting a big upgrade, but not a concern against Green Bay. Tampa Bay has also been getting much easier lately, up above 30 points allowed. So that is a good spot for Stefon Diggs and Demario Douglas. Off the bye, they might be better on defense, but in general, I trust Drake May to exploit a matchup like this. And then the Bills have gotten a little bit easier lately, but not easy enough to can be considered an upgrade. So Waddle and Malik Washington, kind of a neutral expectation on them. And then the Eagles, maybe off the bye, have a good defense again, but on the season they've been somewhat neutral, just slightly below average. So Romeo Doubs, Matthew Golden, and Christian Watson, someone has to step up with no Tucker Kraft. But the next matchup goes to the Browns, Jerry Jeudy, and Cedric Tillman. The Jets should be easier now that Sauce Gardner was traded away. The Arizona Cardinals are kind of a hit or miss, good and tough matchup, so I don't know if I fully trust them, but JSN is matchup proof. Shaheed should have a decent volume here because Kupp and Horton are banged up, so that'll be interesting to watch. Minnesota has gotten really easy to throw against as of late, so up to 31 points per game. They are a top 10 matchup in the last month. So on the season, it's tough, but Flowers and Bateman on paper get an upgrade here. I do like this Vikings matchup for Lamar Jackson. And then Seattle is sometimes really difficult. They have been easier lately, but some injuries have led to those stats. So I don't know if I fully trust Marvin Harrison Jr. and Michael Wilson to be better than expected, but MHJ does look much better with Brissett. The offense is at least sustainable in the passing game without Kyler Murray. Pittman, Downs, and Pierce get a relatively tough matchup against Atlanta, so not upgrading them, but they've been good this year, so still worth a start consideration. And then these last 6 matchups here are definitely the more difficult ones overall. We have Carolina allowing a little more points lately, but still not a good spot for Olave, Brandon Cooks, and Devon Vele. So with no Shaheed, maybe there's some volume up for grabs, but not dying to bet on it. And then these last 5, especially in the last month, have confirmed they are the toughest you can find. Houston, a very tough spot with no Brian Thomas Jr. Maybe Parker Washington still maintains an elite target share, but Myers coming into the mix does have to fill in for Travis Hunter. I just don't like this matchup, especially against Derek Stingley. I don't want to press my luck against the Texans. The Chiefs are a bad matchup, but they are on bye, thankfully, so don't have to worry about it. Dolphins are shockingly the most difficult matchup in the last month. Bottom 3 matchup on the year for wide receivers. So that's pretty shocking. Their secondary isn't impressive, but I just think they're so bad elsewhere. You kind of just do a bunch of other things and then the game is over and the game script doesn't benefit throwing it in the second half. Usually teams are leading against Miami. So maybe Shakir, Keon Coleman, and Josh Palmer get a downgrade on paper, but I still think they'll be kind of the same as always in Buffalo. And then the Chargers are also a tough matchup this season. DK Metcalf not going to be his best game here, but Calvin Austin, Roman Wilson, not going to trust them either. And then lastly, Denver was a tough matchup for Trey Tucker, Jack Betch, and Deontay Thornton. However, Tyler Lockett was the next man up after they trade away Jacoby Myers. So that's it for all of the matchups. That's it, all 32 teams. And now let's move on to my rankings. Let's go through the flex rankings at both running back and wide receiver, and especially early on in the rankings. It is kind of obvious. In the top 12, I have 6 running backs and 6 wide receivers, and there is literally no argument you can be making for me to bench them. So at 1 and 2, I have the Germany game running backs. These two are going to go back and forth. Going to be a fun matchup to watch and wake up to. In Berlin, the Europe game finally gets a really interesting head-to-head battle between Jonathan Taylor and Bijan Robinson. But the reason I have Taylor ranked at 1 as opposed to Bijan is because in the last month, Atlanta has actually been the second best running back matchup in the league. So Taylor gets the tiebreaker. I definitely see it going back and forth, and I definitely expect Bijan to be catching a bunch of passes. They're both going to give you at least 100 plus yards, in my opinion, and probably 2 touchdowns apiece. I think they will relish the opportunity to face off against each other. I would expect a jersey swap, and I think Jonathan Taylor and Bijan are the 2 best plays this week. At number 3, it's pretty obvious. Christian McCaffrey, always in your lineup. The Rams matchup is the most difficult on the season. However, if you look at their stats, they've allowed just 1 running back touchdown all season, and the only running back to score is Christian McCaffrey against the Rams in week 5. So in that game, he had 30 touches, 8 catches, 139 yards, and a touchdown. He had 23.9 half PPR points. You're definitely not benching Christian McCaffrey. But at number 4, I'm going to trust that Commanders matchup is actually the best you can find, with Torrey Horton scoring twice, Cody White dropping an 80-yard house call, and then JSN also going over 100 yards. With Lattimore injured, I don't see any reason to be fading Amon-Ra St. Brown. He gets the biggest upgrade in my opinion. I love him the most. He is my wide receiver 1 in week 10. At number 5, I was genuinely tempted to rank Kyren Williams as the best player in fantasy this week because he owns the Niners. I know he fumbled and technically they did lose in week 5, so maybe it doesn't translate the same way in real NFL terms, but statistically, Kyren plays his best in this rivalry game against San Francisco. If you look at his 4 career games versus the Niners, Kyren is averaging 24.3 points per game on just shy of 25 touches, 4.5 catches per game, 115 total yards per game, and 7 touchdowns in 4 games. The odds state Kyren is more likely to score 2 touchdowns this week than just 1 against San Francisco. I am not fading him. I think these in-division career stats are ones to trust. I kind of ignored them last time because Blake Corum had started to come on, and given Corum fumbled in this matchup, I would expect him to just lean on Kyren again. So I was genuinely tempted to rank him in the top 3 running backs, but those top 3 names cannot be moved outside the top 3. So at number 4 is where I settled. Kyren, I think, will have a better game than Puka Nacua. I have him one spot above Puka at number 5. But Puka's at number 6. He's the wide receiver 2, definitely going to torch the Niners. And given they lost the first game, they kind of need it given they're behind Seattle in division. I would expect the Rams offense to play lights out. Puka, definitely a must start. That's a no-brainer. JSN, also no-brainer. He's pretty much a lock for 100 yards every week. He's unguardable at this point, and there's no argument to be benching JSN. He's definitely a top 5 wide receiver. At the worst this week, I have him at number 3. Number 8 and 9, 2 running backs that are always locks in your lineup. Jahmyr Gibbs may have gotten exposed last week by Brian Flores' defense. Maybe it shows up again. Maybe teams target Gibbs that way. And maybe that's why the Vikings won the game. Perhaps Gibbs' bad game is why. But I wouldn't expect that to be a constant factor for him. I would expect him to bounce back. And perhaps Montgomery vultures you multiple times. But that is literally the only way that Gibbs doesn't pay off. Gibbs is still a lock in the lineup. He still has the highest ceiling of just about any player. If he told me he finishes as number 1 in fantasy this week, would not be shocked at all for those reasons. You cannot bench him. Same with James Cook. He could also finish as the number 1 running back or player in fantasy. Against the Dolphins, it is a good matchup this week. And if we look at his career stats versus Miami, he is playing phenomenal in his last 3 games. He has 4 total touchdowns in his last 3 games against Miami. He's averaging 18.9 points on just shy of 17 touches, 3 catches per game, and 94 total yards per game. With 4 total touchdowns in that span, I would expect at least 1 for Cook this week. Definitely a must start. But his DNP on Wednesday was a bit of a red flag. I think he'll be fine. He's been cleared to play, but you don't love to see that. I still don't fear Ray Davis or Ty Johnson, though. James Cook, a lock in the lineup. In terms of wide receivers in this tier, though, I think they're a little bit less interesting than the top 6 running backs, but wide receiver 4 is Nico Collins for me this week, and I know you're probably kind of afraid of Davis Mills, but I am not. I am definitely not worried at all. The Jaguars are a top 11 matchup and a top 3 matchup for quarterbacks. So I think Davis Mills is going to play very well this week. And last week when he got the job, he kind of just locked on to Nico and Dalton Schultz. Collins should play very well, and especially against Jacksonville, he fucking torches them. In each of his last 4 games, Nico Collins has a minimum of 100 plus yards. To be precise, an average of 120 in those 4 games. His last 4 stat lines are 8 catches, 104 yards and a touchdown. 8 catches, 119 yards, 12 catches, 151 and a touchdown, and 7 catches, 104 yards and a touchdown. He is going off. He will get you at least 100 against Jacksonville. Lock it in. I am 100% trusting and endorsing Nico Collins, even with Davis Mills. I do not fear the Jags secondary. At 5, I do kind of worry about Sauce Gardner, though, but London just torched the Patriots, and with 3 touchdowns against Christian Gonzalez, maybe you don't give a shit. But if you do look closer, where he was effective was when Christian Gonzalez was not guarding him. He actually wasn't very good against Christian Gonzalez. But for whatever reason, the Patriots didn't choose to have Gonzalez just shadow him. And when he got open, he made them pay. So I would assume the Colts learn from the Patriots' mistake and just put Gardner shadowing him all game. That'll limit him a little bit, but still London, I think, is earning matchup proof status. He's a lock in the lineup. No way you're benching him after last week's 40-point outing. No way you're benching him. With 3 elite receivers on bye, though, with a downgrade of a matchup, he still ranks top 5. He is a lock in the lineup. And same with Egbuka. If you have Egbuka, why would you bench him? There's no fucking chance I would do that. As someone who rosters Egbuka, I know how valuable he is. And he's definitely in the top 6. But maybe the Patriots learn from last week and do have Christian Gonzalez shadow the number 1 receiver. But if they let him travel, then Egbuka will torch whoever else is covering him. Egbuka will be fine. I trust Baker to light up the scoreboard with Egbuka. Egbuka's a lock in the lineup. So the top 12, I don't want to waste more time on it. Those are all amazing players, and there's no way you're benching either of the top 6 running backs or wide receivers. But at 13, I don't think we are in the truly elite must-start status anymore. There is one potential red flag that is the case with these players. But at their respective positions, they all rank in the top 14 at least. I still would dismiss any of those red flags. There's also an amazing argument to be forcing them into your lineup regardless of your depth. I rank them way too high to be fading any of these players. And given Rico Dowdle just had 2 touchdowns and reclaimed his job status in Carolina, he's a lock in the lineup. He has 3 games with 30 points this season. How the fuck can you argue to bench Rico Dowdle? Against New Orleans, he should play very well. He should go off. I do not fear the Saints matchup. So got to start Rico. That's a no-brainer. And then this week, I think I'm definitely upgrading Quinshon Judkins at the Jets. He shrugged off a shoulder injury before the bye. He was full in practice. There is no red flag for him to miss the game. And against the Jets, a team that just had a fire sale on defense and was already allowing top 7 fantasy numbers over their last 4 games to the position, this will be a great matchup with no Quinn Williams. So definitely trusting Judkins. He should dominate with an elite workload. He's also giving you at least 1, if not 2 touchdowns. This should resemble that Dolphins game in bad weather. There's also a 55% chance of rain in New Jersey this week. So everything you want is in his favor. And while he isn't matchup proof yet, he's also shown that in good matchups, he can definitely torch the defense and exploit it. This is a very good spot, definitely in a scenario where I'm endorsing Quinshon Judkins. I think he'll have a great game, very high upside against the Jets in week 10. A must start, in my opinion. At RB8, cannot take him out of the lineup. At 15, you're never taking Davante Adams out of the lineup, so a touchdown's pretty much guaranteed for him. I don't want to go too in deep. Adams is always a lock. But behind him, I have both Eagles receivers with DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown. And let's be honest, DeVonta feels a little safer this season. A.J. Brown has the weird vibes and constant headaches. So A.J. Brown has been cleared to play. He didn't play the week before the bye, and their offense looked its best it has this season. However, A.J. Brown should be active, and the Packers secondary doesn't scare me. I'd rather go DeVonta Smith, but I still have both of them in the top 10 at the position. So top 20 overall, 100% you're starting DeVonta Smith and A.J. Brown. Wide receivers 8 and 9, back-to-back. At running back 9, I do have Josh Jacobs in the same game, and this Eagles matchup has been pretty good this season, so perhaps you do want to be starting Josh Jacobs with some extra confidence. But in general, you're just trusting that every week he gives you a touchdown, and even when he's inefficient, he still pads the numbers and is a lock for 16 points. So no chance you're benching Josh Jacobs in primetime. The matchup against Philly has been good, but with the recent additions on the defensive line and Jalen Carter fully healthy, I don't know if this matchup is actually top 10 like the matchup stats would suggest. But I'd rather go Jacobs than Saquon in the same game. I think both of them will play very well, so no concern really with either. Got to lock them into the lineup. There's no argument you can really give me to fade either of them. I trust a touchdown will hit. Technically, the Packers matchup is bottom 5, but with Saquon, I just don't give a shit. There's no way I'm benching Saquon Barkley. And then Devon Achane, always a lockup as well. But in division against Buffalo, he did not score a touchdown last time we saw him. He did get vultured by Ollie Gordon, and perhaps it happens again. He is reliant on some receptions, but generally the touchdown and volume is always there for Achane. Number 20 overall, RB 11 in my ranks. There's no chance in hell you're benching Achane, but I could see this game turn out like 40-10 in favor of Buffalo, and at times they really embarrass you. They also really embarrass the Dolphins especially. So the Dolphins offense, I don't think has more than one touchdown this week, and if it doesn't go to Achane, the upside will be limited. I don't think he's going to have the same ceiling as Jacobs and Saquon, but never a player you're benching. Let's not get cute. Let's move on. At 21 overall, RB12, I have Derrick Henry at Minnesota, and Henry is not going crazy in terms of touchdowns like he did last year, but in the Ravens offense, you would expect them to get back to elite pretty soon. So that's always possible to come back. He could have like an avalanche of touchdowns all of a sudden, but still, even without it, the yardage has been there lately, and I do trust Henry from a floor standpoint. The Vikings matchup is a little difficult against running backs, but not insanely difficult. They've been getting better lately, and maybe I'm wrong here, but based on name value alone, there's really no argument you can point to as to why to fade Henry. I think the Ravens are feeling the desperation. It's a must win in every week rest of season. So I trust Henry enough. I would still start him. I can't think of a reason to bench him. You just got to roll with the punches, and Henry should still be in the lineup. Same with Justin Jefferson at wide receiver 10. There's always some risk with JJ McCarthy, but still Jefferson is just such a good player. You can't really worry too much. You got to grit your teeth and just bear it, but I can't really think of a reason to be benching Justin Jefferson. The matchup is top 6. The Ravens have been vulnerable in the secondary all year. But if you tell me McCarthy lays an egg and just really sucks and Jefferson just doesn't give you a touchdown, I wouldn't be shocked. He feels like more of a floor play these days now that Wentz is out of the lineup. The touchdowns are still very rare for Jefferson this year. That is a red flag, but not big enough of one where I'm going to care too much. I'm dismissing that concern with Justin Jefferson. I'm also going to dismiss any injury concern with Garrett Wilson. Assuming he's active, I don't think it'll linger too much. He's played too well, and I don't think Denzel Ward is that scary where you should care too much. The matchup on the season has been average against Cleveland. So he's the heart of the offense, at least in the passing game. The volume will be there. Justin Fields will lock onto him. And I do not care about the addition of A.D. Mitchell. Garrett Wilson at wide receiver 11. A lock in the lineup. Wide receiver 12, I was dead wrong on Courtland Sutton, so definitely he'll be moving down the rankings. The Raiders matchup was top 7, but I got fooled. Fuck the Broncos. They really let me down. But at 25 and 26, I do have Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen. And this Steelers matchup is the second best on the year. And with the Cowboys on bye this week, it is the best matchup on the slate in week 10. So I trust both of them. I trust the volume. Sometimes the Chargers receiving core is a bit random where the ball goes, but I don't think in primetime they're going to lean on Quentin Johnston. I believe they just are going to trust their two best playmakers, Ladd McConkey and Keenan Allen. So I definitely trust them. The volume should be there, and the Steelers matchup is a major upgrade, so I would expect double-digit points from both of them. At least a touchdown for one of them. Odds are it would go to Ladd McConkey, but odds are Keenan still plays well enough where you should start him. I do not want to be fading the two Chargers receivers against Pittsburgh. The matchup indicates this is a spot you want to trust. And this next tier goes 14 players deep up through the top 40, and there are 6 running backs in this tier and 8 wide receivers. The top 18 RBs, top 22 wideouts, and odds are at least they're in your lineup as the RB2 or wide receiver 2 that you need to fill out the roster. Odds are you still need to start enough players where there is no scenario I'm benching them. Odds are I do not have the depth to be fading these options. And at RB13, player 27 overall, I do have Travis Etienne at Houston. And last week, the volume was insane. Given the injuries to Brian Thomas Jr. and Travis Etienne, I trust that this team is going to lean on Etienne week in, week out. Last week, off the bye, in his first game back, Etienne had 27 overall touches. While he did fail to score a touchdown, they had to bring in Bijan Tutin to finish the drive. He still had 5 catches, 115 total yards, and still a very high floor. Definitely worth a start. So with this type of volume, there is no chance I'm fading Travis Etienne, but touchdowns have been a bit of a problem for him. I'm still kind of worried about his goal line usage, and I would love to see Tutin not vulture him consistently. But with BTJ ruled out, his target share probably increases, and especially in full PPR, the volume is just so safe. I can't think of a reason to fade him. So while I'd rather go Derrick Henry, Devon Achane, and Saquon, Etienne at RB13, a lock in the lineup, I cannot think of a reason to be worried about him. He is just so bust-proof with that level of volume. 27 touches last week, no fucking chance. You can fade him. But let's talk about this matchup real quick. In the last 2 weeks, the Texans' defense has been really vulnerable in terms of pass-catching running backs, and Tutin isn't really the threat in that respect. So I would expect a lot of catches for Etienne in those last 2 games. Houston has allowed 12 total receptions to running backs for a total 102 receiving yards and a receiving touchdown. They've also allowed 7 rushing touchdowns in 9 games this season. So odds are relatively high that there is at least 1 touchdown available for the Jacksonville backfield, and Etienne is going to play very well in the passing game specifically. I think he'll catch 5 receptions again against Houston. They're giving up 6 on average the last 2 games. So I like that, especially in full PPR. ETN should be good. At RB14, right behind him, I also don't think you can bench Rachaad White versus the Patriots. This Patriots matchup is bottom 4 on the year. There's definitely some cause for concern. It is a difficult one. But Bucky Irving remains out, so the volume is pretty much guaranteed for Rachaad White, and generally that makes him a must start. But I am downgrading him a little bit because of the matchup. Usually I rank him top 10, but at RB14, I am respecting the Patriots matchup. On the year, New England has only allowed 4 running back touchdowns on the season. So not expecting a touchdown for Rachaad. The upside I think will be capped. But if you look at the last month, running backs who catch passes are torching the Patriots. They're averaging 8 receptions per game. So the volume has been really, really high in the passing game for a total 48 receiving yards per game. So they're not hyper efficient on that volume, but still it carries you. And especially in full PPR, I trust him a lot. I see a similar stat line for Rachaad White as I see for Travis Etienne. Somewhere around 5 or 6 catches is my projection for this player. So Underdog is only projecting him for 3.5 catches for 19.5 receiving yards. Based on the stats, the Patriots are a good spot for Rachaad to do better than that. I would hit the higher on both of those. I think he will carry you in the passing game, but not on the goal line. I do not expect a touchdown, but the receptions should provide that extra 6 points you're looking for. So the floor is high, the ceiling is a bit low, but I do trust Rachaad White to be bust proof. And in full PPR, I think he could crush. I think he could offer 6+ receptions against New England. So start him if you got him in the top 15 at running back. Cannot tell you to bench him. But these next 4 players are all wide receivers. I would be starting them as well. They're all in my top 18 at the position. And at that rate, I don't think you have the depth to be benching them. So at 15, I have Zay Flowers at Minnesota. In the last month, the Vikings have been a great matchup. Top 6, allowing over 31.5 points per game to the position. Generally, Zay Flowers this year maybe hasn't had that elite upside all the time, but has been a lot more consistent in terms of floor. He's usually giving you at least like 60, 70 yards, and that's great. That's way better than the lack of floor we remember him having before last season. So I am more interested in Flowers these days, and with 5 legit wide receivers on bye, I would normally rank above him. He does crack the top 15 at the position. So go ahead and start him. I think the floor is relatively bust proof, and in a must win with a good matchup like this, the Vikings don't scare me at all. I expect Lamar to play very well, and they have extra rest coming off the mini bye week last Thursday. I think Flowers is very safe and does still offer that like elite ceiling. When he plays well, he goes for like 120 plus and usually a touchdown. So love the upside. You could get 25 points. And even if you don't, even if he has a mediocre game again, you're still going to guarantee at least like 8 points. That is bust proof. And while it's not good in half PPR, that's usually not the reason why you lose. So I think he's a good start. I would endorse Flowers. The upside I think is truly elite against the Vikings in a good matchup here. Stefon Diggs also gets a solid matchup. Lately, the Bucks have been more vulnerable. So with no Quinshon Booty, I like the upside for Diggs a lot. The volume should be good, and this game has very high shootout potential, so very high odds of a touchdown. He has a touchdown in back-to-back games. That was really the only thing missing for him. So now that he's healthy, now that he's good to go, pretty safe volume to bet on. I'm hoping for a touchdown, but even without it, I think the floor is pretty bust-proof. Just like Flowers, I would expect at least like 65 yards for Diggs regardless. So I would start him a very safe floor play with legit upside. With no booty, his touchdown odds do increase. At 17, I have Jaylen Waddle versus Buffalo, and I generally never really trust Tua to be throwing multiple touchdown passes. So if it goes elsewhere, you're not going to get that second one most likely. Waddle does scare me in that regard, but otherwise, there's no real red flag with Waddle. The volume is pretty consistent with Tyreek Hill and Darren Waller on IR. There's no real threat to him. And last week, it did carry you to 80 plus yards. That's usually my projection for Waddle in this offense. So the Bills sometimes really embarrass the Dolphins. It is possible he shits the bed, but in general, I would at least expect some good game script in garbage time to cover you. So the volume will be fine. Waddle's going to be good. The yardage will be at least like 75 yards. I think the floor is worth starting and trusting with Waddle. He will perennially be like a top 22, top 25 receiver. And with 5 legit receivers on bye, I would normally rank above him. I think Waddle is worth a start this week. Definitely in the top 20 in week 10. Number 18 is Michael Pittman Jr. And my mantra with him all year has been, if it's not broke, don't fix it. Last week, the touchdown did not hit, but he still went over 100 yards. And Atlanta has a good defense, but I would still expect a good game for Michael Pittman. There's really no reason to be upset with him. If you drafted him, he's well exceeded your expectations. And odds are a touchdown does come back to him. He's not a lock for that. At some point, I would assume it would evade him, but honestly, I can make the case that if this matchup was better, he'd be more valuable than guys like Garrett Wilson and Ladd McConkey this week. Pittman has been money in the bank, and I would assume he continues to play well. So not going to bench him. I just like the spot and matchup a little better for guys like Waddle, Diggs, and Flowers. But at number 18, Pittman should be a lock in the lineup. 32 overall, definitely worth a start. At 33 and 34, though, got to own up to my mistake. Last night, I endorsed RJ Harvey and JK Dobbins, and at least Dobbins was somewhat okay, had a lot more volume, but neither scored a touchdown. I thought both of them could be able to do that. The Raiders didn't scare me, and I was dead wrong. RJ Harvey, though, was a terrible call. Harvey had a really, really bad game, and sorry if you plugged him in on my recommendation. I paid the price. I started both of them in my full PPR league, and got 13 points combined from two players. That sucks. So I am sorry, but rest of the season, it looks like RJ Harvey might be getting a boost in value. Coming out of that game, Dobbins had a foot injury. While he finished the game, he got a second opinion, and it's not looking good. It looks like Dobbins going to miss time moving forward. So RJ Harvey going to be a must start if Dobbins actually misses some time, but at least in week 10, that didn't help you whatsoever. Next two players are a bit risky, but I love the upside for them. And at 35 overall, wide receiver 19, I'm telling you to start Jameson Williams at the Commanders. It is a great matchup, top 3 this season, top 2 in the last 4 games. And we just saw Cody White drop an 80-yard house call. We saw Torrey Horton with a deep touchdown. Same for Elijah Arroyo, and Darnold put on a clinic. So I expect a big get-right game for the Lions offense this week. I think given they lost to Washington in the playoffs, it ended their season last year. They want some revenge. And off the Vikings loss, they're hungry for a win. So love this spot for Goff. And typically when I endorse Goff, it's because JMO is going to have a good game. Last week, he also had a house call. I think it is going to come back to him. I like this spot a lot. The Commanders secondary is absolute garbage. So JMO with elite upside, always some high risk with him, could give you a bagel, but I think in this game, he will give you like a 50-yard reception that probably finds the end zone. So could give you 12 points on just one play. For that reason, in a good matchup, I like JMO a lot. The Commanders are a top 3 matchup. I'm going to trust that and tell you to start Jameson Williams. But Marvin Harrison Jr. at Seattle, not a good matchup against the Seahawks, but looked amazing last week. I don't think Reek Woolen is going to look as bad on defense, though, as Deron Bland did. Bland got cooked in the red zone, and Harrison really looked amazing. So Harrison looks better with Brissett. That's a reason to endorse him. I still think he's top 20 at the position, but Seattle has been a tough spot. Not a good matchup in general for opposing wide receivers. Just ask Deebo Samuel last week. It was brutal for Washington. So it could be a problem. Marvin Harrison has not really excelled in his 3 games against Seattle either. He has a maximum of 66 yards in those 3 games and a minimum of 47. However, earlier this year was his first career touchdown against the Seahawks. He had 10 targets, 6 catches, 66 yards, and a touchdown against Seattle earlier in the season. So maybe that happens again, but in general, Harrison is not like a consistent player. He rarely has like 2 great games in a row. So I think he'll come back down to earth a little bit. I don't have him anywhere near as high in the rankings as I did last week. Against Dallas, I had him as a top 12 receiver, but I only dropped him down to number 20 at the position. At 36 overall, I would still start Marvin Harrison Jr. I think I've seen enough from Brissett in this offense to trust MHJ. He looks much better with the change in quarterback. So wide receiver 20, don't think you can afford to bench him, but maybe you have the depth. I doubt it. I think at worst, he's a good flex play. And at 37, I did have Ashton Jeanty as RB17 last night. It was basically exactly what I expected. While I was wrong about the Broncos running backs being better, otherwise, I think my call on Jeanty was pretty spot on. He didn't look good. He only had 3.2 yards per carry. The efficiency was terrible again. He had 22 touches on the game with 3 catches for 3 yards. That didn't move the needle. However, he did score a touchdown and did salvage the fantasy output. That's exactly what I thought. The volume would carry you, but the efficiency would be gross, and he wouldn't be an elite top 10 play this week, but a touchdown would still be worth starting. And that's what happened. The Broncos backfield was much worse, but otherwise, I had a pretty good call on Ashton Jeanty. Next up, these next two players are both wide receivers, and at wide receiver 21, player 38 overall, I do have Jauan Jennings, who is the wide receiver 1 in San Francisco. That's generally a player you want in your lineup. And last time they played the Rams, Kendrick Bourne fucking torched them. So maybe Jauan is going to have that type of stat line. I doubt it. I think he'll be fine. But generally, without a touchdown, he's been just a floor play lately, but is getting about 7 targets per game, 4 catches every week for about 40, 50 yards. And against the Rams, maybe he steps up and plays better, but I'm just hoping for a touchdown. And given the offense he plays in, I think that's a relatively safe bet to be making. So not my favorite play, but with 4 teams on bye and 3 really valuable receiving cores, I think he cracks at worst the flex rankings. And at player 38 overall, I don't really see a reason to be fully fading him. The volume in San Francisco is generally safe to bet on. Maybe I would like him more with Brock Purdy under center. I think the chemistry would be better with Purdy as opposed to Mac Jones, but I trust that this game is going to be a shootout and I want a piece of it. Jauan Jennings should play well. I think he'll have a good game against the Rams. At worst, you're going to get a 7 target floor, and that's generally a player you want. Generally pretty bust proof. So might be lackluster, but I think a touchdown will save you. Just like Jeanty, kind of low efficiency, but a touchdown does put you over 12 points. DK Metcalf, I think, will have a similar outcome this week. The Chargers matchup is bad. On paper, it's bottom 2, but Metcalf is usually the safest bet for a touchdown in the Steelers offense. And in prime time, I think this game could be kind of high scoring. My only fear is that Chris Boswell is going to kick like 5 field goals and Rodgers just doesn't have the touchdown production. But odds are Rodgers plays well with a home crowd favoring them. At SoFi, there's going to be a lot of Steelers fans, and they shouldn't have to go silent count on the road. So generally, I trust Metcalf. I think you're going to need some yak, but I expect at least 70 yards, and I think a touchdown will hit for Metcalf. Odds are he's a solid play. So wide receiver 22, I think he's worth a spot in your lineup. In the top 40 overall at flex, I don't think I would fade Metcalf too much. I would start DK at receiver. But the last player in this tier is not a lock to play. I have DeAndre Swift at RB 18, and I would rank him much higher if he practiced on Friday. But he was off the field with a groin/personal issue, and the injury is mainly the concern. I assume he'll play because he was full in practice on Thursday, limited Wednesday. He didn't play last week, but for him to be full on any day of the week, I would assume he'll play on Sunday. So sounds like Ben Johnson feels confident that'll be the case. I think they're planning for Swift to be active, but you have to make sure, and given he missed last week, there is some risk here. So it sounds like Ben Johnson wants to have a hot hand approach, and Kyle Monangai played well enough where that could be a problem. But given the matchup is elite against the Giants, it ranks top 3. I think it's the best upgrade you can find this week, and I would definitely trust Swift if he's active. I expect the Bears to be running the ball like crazy. I think they'll have another 200 plus rushing yards, just like last week. So Swift, I think a lock in the lineup in this Bears run game. You want the starter, and I think he'll play. I think he'll be fine. As long as he's active, I would start DeAndre Swift. But in the next tier, the next 3 players are also Chicago Bears. And at 41 overall, RB19, right behind DeAndre Swift, I do have Kyle Monangai in the same boat. I think it's going to be a big committee between the two. I do not think Monangai is going away. He played way too well last week for them to just fade him and say, thanks for your service, but we're not giving you the ball in a great matchup. The Giants cannot stop the run, and the Bears will lean on the run with both Swift and Monangai. If you tell me Swift is inactive, if he doesn't play, then Monangai would move all the way up into the top 20. I'd rather go Monangai than Derrick Henry this week. He'd be my RB12 at the position. So at RB19, I still think he's a great play. He's just going to be in a timeshare with Swift, and odds are he might get more touches than Swift given Swift's injuries. So I kind of wanted to rank him above Swift straight up, but assuming Swift plays, I still think he's the RB1 in this offense. I still think he's the guy you'd rather have, but not by much. I got him back-to-back for a reason, and I would expect similar volume for both players. Ben Johnson said himself they will use a hot hand approach, and it wouldn't shock me if Monangai fucking dominates against the Giants. The weather's also bad, a lot of wind and a cold game here. I doubt it's going to be raining or snowing, but it is possible, and if that's the case, even more likelihood they run the ball even extra. So love Kyle Monangai, love Swift. As long as both are active, they're both back-to-back in the top 20 at the position in a top 3 matchup. 42 and 43 overall are both Bears receivers, though. DJ Moore and Rome Odunze are top 24 in my receiver rankings, and I would just start both of them. But after last week, I have to rank DJ Moore higher. I do not know what the fuck happened with Rome Odunze. The team scored 47, and Rome Odunze had a bagel. He was involved in a trick play and coughed it up for DJ Moore to have a passing touchdown to Caleb Williams. So whatever's going on, I don't really know what it is, but Ben Johnson just knows what he's doing. So I'll trust that this offense is going to be very valuable week in, week out. And odds are Rome Odunze will get back into the mix pretty quickly. So I still believe you want Rome more than DJ Moore rest of the season. But after last week, DJ Moore was just way too good. I got to rank him above Rome because the elite performance versus Bagel was just so stark. Maybe Odunze is not safe, but neither practiced on Wednesday. They were both full on Friday. I assume both will play. The Giants matchup is solid. It has been top 10 on the year, but the weather might be a problem. Maybe they don't throw it as much. I'd still start both of them. I want the Bears offense in my lineup. So not going to care about the bagel too much, but I would still rank DJ Moore above Rome Odunze. At wide receiver 25, 44 overall, I have Deebo Samuel versus Detroit. And with no Terry McLaurin, you just can't fade him too much. The injury to his heel has been a big problem. I do think that is holding him back. But mainly what's holding him back is Mariota under center. But against the Lions, it's a top 8 matchup, especially in the last month. It's been even better. They're giving up over 33.5 points per game to the position. And the Lions secondary just doesn't scare me at all. So it's just the health status of Deebo Samuel. I think he's playing through pain, and that's why he's not as elite as he was earlier in the year. But if you look at the 3 starts with Mariota, in 2 of those games, Deebo's been really bad. One of them, he had like 3.5 points. Last week wasn't impressive. But then he also has a great game with about 17.5 fantasy points. So you're hoping that the law of averages say in 4 games, he'll have 2 bad ones, 2 good ones. And hopefully that does happen this week. The matchup indicates it will be the case, but I don't trust Mariota very much. I worry there are no touchdowns available, and for that reason, I think he's just a flex play. At wide receiver 25, you could do better, but the floor is still probably there where he's bust-proof. With no Terry, I still think you're starting Deebo Samuel. These next 2 running backs are a little bit tricky, but I think you're still probably starting them. But we are more so in the flex conversation now going forward. I'd probably still start them. I'm definitely projecting over 10 points here. However, there is some risk factoring in with TreVeyon Henderson and David Montgomery at RB 20 and 21. Maybe you're not as excited as I am, but I see some high upside for both this week. Let's start with TreVeyon Henderson at Tampa Bay, where Ramondre Stevenson is out again. And last week he did get vultured by Terrell Jennings. Obviously, Vrabel just hates him, so it can't be perfect. But he did have the most volume. He had 18 total touches, and 4 of them were receptions. Where I'm excited is that the Buccaneers matchup is bad against the run, but in the passing game, running backs can't exploit them. They have been very vulnerable in that regard. So I do like TreVeyon to get another high volume game here. With no Ramondre, he's definitely the RB1. They drafted him in the 2nd round. And last week, he still had 10.7 points with no touchdown. That's hard to complain about. I think the floor is pretty safe here. And odds are the Bucs are too difficult to run against. I don't think Terrell Jennings will vulture him. So maybe there's no touchdown at all for a running back here, but I wouldn't be shocked at all if he drops another 10 points without a touchdown. And if the touchdown does hit, you'll be really thrilled that you trusted TreVeyon Henderson. So I don't see enough reasons to be fading him. All of the arguments here are pointing to trust the volume, and I do think he'll be efficient enough. The Bucs have been a top 10 matchup for running backs on the season. Lately, they have not been tough to run against at all. So I like TreVeyon as a safe play, but I do worry inevitably the touchdown will hit this week, though. I'm not dying to expect it. Against Tampa off the bye, I could see Vita Vea and the defensive line really shut down the run game. So not dying to endorse him, but given Ramondre's out, he definitely moves up the list. And with 4 teams on bye, I think the volume is safe enough. I would trust him. He catches passes. He's efficient. I think he's a top 20 running back in this game. But at 21 at the position, I have Dave Montgomery at Washington. And sometimes he shits the bed. Sometimes he only offers you like 60 yards and no touchdown. But this game, I think, is a massive blowout by the Lions. I think they want revenge from that playoff loss. And the Commanders don't really scare me on any side on defense. So I do think it's better for JMO and Amon-Ra, but I would still expect Montgomery to contribute. And odds are he finds the end zone. I think the Lions will score 5 touchdowns this week, and one of them probably goes to Montgomery. But when he doesn't score a touchdown, he's been brutal. There is high risk, high reward. I think this week the reward is worth it. But because of those risk factors, I only think he's a flex play at RB21. He's not a lock in the lineup, but in the top 50 overall, odds are you'll start him. Odds are you don't have the depth to bench him. At wide receiver 26 and 27, I got WanDale Robinson and Romeo Doubs back to back here. And I love the matchup for WanDale. The Chicago defense has been terrible at stopping receivers, even worse over the last month. So since the bye, their secondary is trash. Until Jalen Johnson comes back, there's no savior coming to the rescue. And I don't think Jalen Johnson is coming back at all this year on IR. So love WanDale from a volume perspective. He's very safe, but he's mainly just a PPR floor play. Last week had 9 receptions and less than 50 yards. And odds are he gives you a similar stat line yet again. But the Bears are a good spot for expecting touchdowns at receiver. So as long as the weather doesn't shut him down, I think this floor is very safe. I think the upside is worth it this week. WanDale has a lot of reasons to be trusted in this matchup. I give him a big upgrade because the Bears secondary fucking sucks. So like Jaxon Dart in this game, I like WanDale. I want to rank him higher, but with the weather factoring in, there is a slight chance he burns you. And then even with elite volume, he still might not go over 50 points. He's generally just a floor play, but there is a little extra upside. This week, he's definitely a top 30 receiver. So maybe you'll bench him, but I think he gets the green light. I trust WanDale a decent amount this week. And Romeo Doubs with no Tucker Kraft, probably the safest bet at receiver in Green Bay. He has been all year. The Eagles matchup isn't terrible, but against Quinyon Mitchell, maybe I'm overestimating Romeo Doubs. It's possible that Love looks really bad yet again, but Love has been good from a yardage standpoint. And with no Kraft, I would expect the most volume to go to Romeo Doubs. So I think he's the safest start in this Packers receiving core. At wide receiver 27, I would probably start him. I probably don't think of a reason to bench him enough. I think he'll be fine against Philadelphia. These next 2 players are both running backs, and they do scare me in the same game, though. In primetime, odds are they get enough volume to still carry you. I have Jaylen Warren at the Chargers and Kimani Vidal versus Pittsburgh back-to-back at RB22 and RB23. And for Warren, you're just hoping for a touchdown. But in general, the passing game usage does cover your bases. And I would expect around 75, 80 or so yards against the Chargers. But sometimes they're a great matchup. Sometimes they're terrible. And I don't really know what to make of it. I'm just expecting the same average stat line from Jaylen Warren. So that's typically an average flex play, solid usage. But if not for 4 teams on bye, I probably wouldn't rank him inside the top 50 overall. At 50, though, I have Kimani Vidal, and last week, even in a good matchup, he couldn't exploit it. He's very game script dependent, and with no Joe Alt against the Steelers, who just shut down Jonathan Taylor, I'd probably fade him. I probably would downgrade Kimani, more likely than not. But he gets a lot of volume. He's still the guy. Last week, Jarrett Patterson factored in, though, and maybe you get screwed. But the risk-reward proposition probably keeps him in the flex, in your lineup. But these next 3 players, I don't think have the ceiling this week. Not good matchups for them. Chris Olave always gets high volume, but only expecting about 50 yards. Against J.C. Horn, they probably double team him now that Shaheed's off the team. Olave, I don't think is a good start. With Tyler Shuck at Carolina, it's a bad matchup. J.C. Horn should lock him up. I think he'll give you that same floor as always, but he does have more volume than any other player remaining, so I still think he's a top 30 receiver, probably worth a flex play. And then same with Ted McMillan in the same game. Still gets good volume, but I don't really trust Bryce Young. And this offense is pivoting to a run-first team with Dowdle, so no thanks if I can avoid it with Ted, but odds are he still gets you like 8-9 points. And then Khalil Shakir, always kind of a safe 9-point type of player, but the Dolphins shockingly are bottom 3 matchup this season for receivers, and maybe the game script does not favor him whatsoever. So risky play, tough matchup, but in general the Bills still keep him viable. He is the safest receiver that they have, but in this spot, if it wasn't for 4 teams on bye, I'd probably rank him outside of the flex territory. Last player in this tier though is Zach Charbonnet at RB24. I still expect touchdowns to go to him more likely than Kenneth Walker, but it's so frustrating in this committee. It's really a crapshoot. And then last week, the game script just benefited receivers so much. They also got vultured by AJ Barner with a tush-push touchdown. So the offensive coordinator just doesn't like these players for fantasy purposes. They don't give a shit. And that's why I don't want to start either of them. But if you put a gun to my head, I still expect a decent floor from both. They're still pretty talented. And odds are the touches in the red zone come back to them. Charbonnet, I still think, is the guy you want. But right behind him, beyond the tier break, I do have Walker back-to-back at RB25. I see a very similar path for both of them. But I expect Charbonnet to be vulturing Walker more often than not. So good luck with both, but you know they're risky flex plays at best. But in this tier, I do like some receivers with some confidence. I have Josh Downs at wide receiver 31. And Downs is pretty effective. Last week, a touchdown kind of saved you, but all 3 Colts receivers played well. And against the Falcons, the matchup isn't good, but I still kind of trust the volume to be there for Downs week in, week out. So with 4 teams on bye, he cracks my top 32 at the position. I think he's a solid flex play, but he is kind of touchdown dependent. And in general, you're kind of just playing him for the floor. He usually offers like 7 or 8 targets, and like 5-6 catches is pretty safe. That is usually good for like 8+ points, but a touchdown is really what you need. And it is possible, but against the Falcons, maybe he gets vultured by Pittman and Jonathan Taylor. But I'd still rather go Downs than Alec Pierce. I like all 3 Colts receivers. Downs, I think, is the number 2. Troy Franklin, I did tell you, was a solid flex play last night, and the touchdown did save me, but he wasn't that impressive. He was fine. Courtland Sutton, though, was dog shit. At least Franklin was better than Courtland Sutton. But at wide receiver 33, I have Demario Douglas at Tampa Bay, and with no Quinshon Judkins, I like the volume increase for Demario. Pop is usually a safe floor play. However, Quinshon has really stolen his job this season. With him out, I think the upside does come back to him. It's probably a shootout against Tampa Bay, and this wide receiver matchup is not too bad. In the last month, they've been giving up over 30 points to the position. So I like the volume. I'm actually starting Demario in both of my fantasy teams this week. I picked him up in both leagues off the wire if he's still available now that Butte has been ruled out. I do like Demario quite a bit. A solid flex play. I think a similar stat line to Franklin is to be expected. A touchdown will be critical, but if it happens, wouldn't shock me at all against the Buccaneers. Breece Hall at 59. I don't think he's going to have a good game. The Browns matchup is terrible. Bottom 2 here for Breece Hall. So he's just a low-end flex play in my opinion. If it wasn't for his talent, then I'd rank him well outside the top 30 because the Browns matchup scares me a lot. However, last time we saw him, he had an amazing game against the Bengals, but that matchup was the best you could find. The Browns are the second worst you can find. It's much, much different in terms of matchups. So I'm downgrading him significantly. Odds are he doesn't score a touchdown. In general, he never does. And the last time we saw him in week 8 feels like his best game of the year. Definitely a fluke, not something I would expect to repeat. So maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he dominates again, but given he wasn't traded, I could see the vibes be bad in that Jets locker room and he just kind of doesn't care. I don't really like this offense enough to trust. So no thanks with Breece, but given his talent and volume, he's still in the flex conversation. At RB26, you'll probably start him, but you could bench him, and definitely I wouldn't hate it. In the flex conversation, though, he's probably still going to get you 8 or 9 points. Quentin Johnston, Jordan Addison, Rashid Shaheed, and Christian Watson come in right behind him, and that speaks to the risk level of Breece Hall this week. There is no chance in hell you can tell me that those 4 receivers I just mentioned are safe plays, but they all have high upside. They all have some house call ability, and especially in a good matchup for Quinshon Judkins, I do think he has some value against Pittsburgh. The Steelers are the second best wide receiver matchup on the year, and QJ did play well last week, but in prime time, I don't think they're going to force feed him the ball. I think he crumbles in the bright lights. I don't think he can handle those big moments, and if he drops a pass or fumbles again, they will move off him very quickly. So no thanks if I can avoid it, but obviously the upside is definitely worth it to some people. If you're desperate, QJ has the highest ceiling remaining in the league. So go ahead and start him at number 60 overall. He's probably going to be in your flex lineup, but you could fade him, and definitely I wouldn't hate it whatsoever. I could see a terrible game, but the Steelers offer an upgrade on paper. Jordan Addison also gets a slight upgrade against Baltimore, but not sure I totally trust it with JJ McCarthy as the quarterback. I barely trust Justin Jefferson, so he definitely loses value. With Wentz, he was playing well, but I don't trust touchdowns for him with JJ McCarthy, and it's just a really rough bet to make, so I'm not excited, but Addison is really talented, so to pretend the upside isn't elite would be a lie. Similar to Quinshon Judkins, you are risking a lot, but the matchup is good enough where he'll still probably be in the flex conversation. Wide receiver 35 is usually right on the bubble, kind of on the fence of your lineup / bench, so go for it if you have to, but I don't feel good about it. I'm not a believer in JJ McCarthy. The volume is pretty low. But Rashid Shaheed could play well in his first game with Seattle. Obviously, it's risky because there's not much chemistry there with Darnold. However, he knows this system. He played for the offensive coordinator in New Orleans last year. Clint Kubiak did come from the Saints offense last season. So there is familiarity there. He knows the system, so the playbook will be picked up quickly. And then Cooper Kupp is returning to practice, but banged up, not expecting him to play or really contribute at all. And then Torrey Horton went down with a hamstring injury on Thursday. He is doubtful for this game. So Shaheed will slot in immediately. He will be running routes, and there is a lot of upside. Darnold looks really good, especially when throwing it down the field. So Shaheed with some high boom bust upside. The Cardinals matchup isn't great, but I kind of don't care. It's mainly just what is his chemistry with Darnold. That is the main red flag, but I like his upside. I think there is an argument to be made that Shaheed is a solid flex play this week. I kind of want to rank him much higher, but I think the path for success with guys like Josh Downs, Pop Douglas is safer to bet on. And then the upside, I think, is still higher with guys like Quinshon Judkins and Jordan Addison. But same tier as them, very high upside as well. But if you told me he gives you like 5 points, wouldn't shock me at all. He's been either giving you 5 or 6 points or like 15, 18, 20. It is boom bust, high risk, high reward. Go for it if you need him. But if you roster Shaheed, I do consider the trade a significant upgrade in terms of value. The Seahawks offense much better than the Saints offense. So touchdowns will be more likely. I like his upside, but feels a bit risky in his first game with his new team. Christian Watson comes in at 63 overall, wide receiver 37. So at this point, you're probably fading these players, but I do think he has legit flex appeal against the Eagles. It probably is a shootout. The Eagles don't have good depth at wide receiver, so beyond Quinyon Mitchell, they can be exploited. And I do expect Love to take some shots down the field. They're going to need him against the Eagles. Odds are they will trail, and there'll be some good game script for Christian Watson. So hoping for some good volume down the field. It's possible one of those passes does connect. Same risk factor with Shaheed, Addison, and Johnston. If he gives you a rough game, you're not going to be surprised at all. He's a bit too boom bust. And since he's only coming back from injury recently, I still don't feel that confident in the lineup. There is some heavy risk factors, but he does have upside. To pretend he does not have upside would be a lie. He could play well, but odds are I'll fade him. Odds are he's a low-end flex option, and perhaps you have the depth to bench him. These next 4 players are all running backs, and this next name might surprise you, but I do think Alvin Kamara has some upside this week. In this season, he's been dog shit. Kamara has been really bad since like week 1 or 2. He's been unstartable. But against Carolina, for whatever reason, he gets up for this division rivalry game. If you look at his last 4 games, he's actually been really, really effective. An average of 16.1 points per game with only 2 touchdowns, an average of 111 total yards against Carolina. They cannot stop him for whatever reason. The last game he played against New Orleans last year, he was dominant as fuck. 29 rush attempts. That's insane volume at his age. 155 rushing yards. He did not score a touchdown, but he also had 9 targets and 6 catches, another 60 yards. Kamara was insanely productive against Carolina last time he played them. So this year he's been so bad, I cannot expect anything close to that. But to pretend like that isn't relevant, like he doesn't play well in division against Carolina, that would be a lie. So there is some upside here. There is a shot that he plays well, but odds are you don't trust him at all. If not for these matchup stats, I would have ranked him like 10 spots lower at the position, not just overall, but at the position. He would have been a clear bench until I looked in to these division stats. That is the only thing that has me interested in Kamara, but I don't dismiss those division stats entirely. I do read into them a little bit. And for that reason, I think he's an interesting flex option. You know the volume will be there. He probably gets an increase in targets with no Shaheed. But I do think Taysom Hill is coming and could be a problem for him soon. Might not be a good play. He's been bad. It feels really risky. But one spot at running back behind Breece Hall, I do think you could do worse. At RB27, it's not the worst bet you could make. He does play well against Carolina. Last 4 games against the Panthers, an average of 16.1 points per game for Kamara. Maybe you'll read into that and start him. Odds are, though, I'd probably bench him. At 65, I have Aaron Jones versus Baltimore, and the matchup isn't terrible, but Aaron Jones looked to be more valuable than Jordan Mason last week. I still think he's more talented, but obviously injuries are a problem. He's pretty old, and he was limited in practice with an ankle injury / shoulder. He is not 100%, so not a guarantee to finish the game, just like Alvin Kamara. That is a big risk factor. At his age, it's not ideal, but against the Ravens, if you're desperate for running back, I guess you could settle on Aaron Jones. Last week was somewhat valuable. The floor should be around 6 or 7 fantasy points in half PPR. At 66 overall, RB29, I have Emari Demercado at Seattle, and I have no idea what to make of the Cardinals running back room. I'm just waiting for Trey Benson to come back, but last week I assumed Bam Knight would be the guy. There were some reports that Michael Carter was going to get first team reps, and it ended up being Emari Demercado, which shocked the hell out of me. After that fumble from Demercado, I thought they had written him off. So don't know what to make of it. It feels like a hot hand approach. It could pivot back to Bam Knight or Carter and not shock me at all. But after last week, I got to rank Demercado as the most valuable. So not trusting him, but at RB29, I guess you could do much, much worse. I guess if you're desperate, go ahead. He's a starting NFL running back, and that is somewhat valuable. But with 4 teams on bye, he's outside my top 28. I trust Kamara more than Demercado. That should be saying quite a lot. But right behind him, I have Woody Marks versus the Jaguars, and the Jags matchup is really bad for running backs, so not going to press my luck. Woody needs receptions, and with Davis Mills last week, he had 0 catches. So not a good matchup, not a good upgrade at all, and I would be terrified that there is no PPR value with Davis Mills. Mills looks more down the field and would check it down to Schultz, well above Woody Marks. So not ideal at all. Definitely going to fade him. RB30, he's a starter, but that's the only reason why he cracks the top 30 at the position. No thank you. If I can avoid it, I would. But same with Trey Tucker. He was kind of a desperation option, and against Denver with no Pat Surtain, I considered him a top 40 receiver, but that was a rough spot. He had one big breakaway play, but it was negated by penalty, so no value at all. Trey Tucker was pretty ass last night. So ranked him too high, but at wide receiver 38, I wasn't really that high on him in the first place. But beyond this point, I think we should be benching all these players, and you got to be a bit desperate moving forward. So let's go a little bit faster in terms of the logic to start them. I don't see why I would trust Parker Washington against Houston. The matchup against Derek Stingley is going to be dog shit, but it is possible that the trade of Jacoby Myers puts that matchup on Myers and away from Parker Washington. With the injury to Travis Hunter and Brian Thomas Jr., neither will play. Parker Washington has the best chemistry with Trevor Lawrence. So the Texans matchup is terrible. That's why I'm not going to trust him. But last week he had a ton of targets. I don't think that chemistry is just going to disappear. I would still rather roster Parker Washington above Jacoby Myers. I think he's the second most valuable Jags receiver rest of season. So I like his value rest of season. Long term, I think he does have some solid argument to be rostered and played. But against Houston, no thank you. Terrible matchup here. I will be fading him for sure against Houston. It's the matchup. That is the reason why I'm going to fade him. But on paper, with no BTJ, I understand the logic for expecting more volume and maybe a safer floor worth a start. But against Houston, no thank you. I will bench him. I'm also going to bench Alec Pierce versus the Falcons. Really good game last week, but in general, it's not destined to repeat week over week. And I love his upside down the field. He's a good deep threat, but I prefer Josh Downs, and the Falcons matchup is a bit tough. I'm only going to tell you to start him if you're desperate. Alec Pierce, still just a bench stash, but a good depth piece nonetheless. With 4 teams on bye and very relevant options unavailable, I do have him top 40 at the position. You could do worse. That is a decent low-end flex play, but beyond Parker Washington, I'd rather bench him. No thanks on Alec Pierce. But if you're desperate, go ahead. There is some upside for sure. Same with Rachaad Bateman. Scored a touchdown last week against the Vikings. It's a very good matchup. So perhaps the upside I expect to go to Flowers goes to Bateman. If he scores a touchdown, you'll be very happy. Without it, though, you'll be kind of screwed. And I don't trust the volume generally. So no thanks. But Lamar could really torch the Vikings this week. I like the matchup quite a bit. There is upside. He is ranked much higher than I typically put him. He's usually around wide receiver 55 in my rankings. So much higher than general, that's for sure. Tez Johnson, though, offers a similar upside argument. There is someone who has to step up beyond Egbuka, and it can't just go to Cade Otton. I don't trust Sterling Shepard very much, so Tez Johnson off the bye, probably going to be more involved in this offense. Baker is a good quarterback, so hoping for a deep shot, but without it, you'll probably max out at like 40 yards, and that's probably not worth your time. So boom bust with Tez, but some high upside given his speed. And then Darius Slayton, also an interesting option. Last 2 weeks, he has 12 targets total, 88 total yards. And last week he did have 7 targets. His usage is increasing with Jaxon Dart. There is some value against Chicago. The matchup is really good, but the weather is a problem. The weather's gross here, and I think that will limit him a little bit. And without a touchdown, you're not going to get more than 7 points. So need that, and without it, you'll get kind of screwed. So I understand plugging him in if you have a bunch of players on bye. The matchup is phenomenal, but the weather is gross, and I still don't really trust many touchdowns to be going elsewhere than Theo Johnson in the Giants system. It's still kind of gross for touchdowns in New York. So that's my main concern. I don't trust a touchdown, but the volume should be there. The matchup indicates he gets an upgrade. But generally, just like Rachaad Bateman, I rank him well outside the top 50, sometimes unranked overall. He is on my radar. I think I've been sleeping on him a little bit. Now that he's healthy, he looks better. And I do think he's an okay desperation swing. But at 73 overall, odds are you'll bench him. Wide receiver 43 is not that safe in general. These next 6 players, though, are all running backs, and I have no desire to start them, but the volume might carry you. There are still some starters that are in the rankings left to be mentioned. We have Jordan Mason versus Baltimore on similar footing to Aaron Jones, but I think Jones in the passing game has more value in full PPR and even half PPR, so Mason in a tough matchup, not going to trust him. The Ravens have gotten much, much tougher against the run as of late, so not expecting a touchdown, not expecting much upside for Mason. I'll bench him. And then in Washington, both Commanders running backs are in a big timeshare, and McNichols still factors in on occasion. So last week they had equal touches against Detroit. I don't think that's going to lead to good value at all. The Lions are the 3rd toughest matchup for running backs on the year, and in the last 4 games, they are the toughest overall, an average of just 12 points per game allowed by Detroit. So you need a touchdown. I have no idea where it would go. Odds are it might even go to Chris Rodriguez above JCM. I still think I'd rather have Bill, but the hype and value has quickly faded. It is evaporated now that Jaden Daniels is gone, and I expect them to get vultured by Mariota. So no thanks at all. They eat into each other's value, and against Detroit, there is none whatsoever. I don't trust either Commanders running back. No thank you. But at RB 32 and 33, the starters are starting to run out. And last team with starting running backs left to mention is the New York Giants. And last week, I don't even know who the right guy to trust is. Devin Singletary actually had more volume than Tyrone Tracy. Singletary and Tracy were not getting more than 10 touches, though, so that does not offer any safety whatsoever. The Bears matchup has been terrible lately. While on the season they ranked top 10, in the last month since the bye, they're down to bottom 3. They're allowing only 14.1 points per game to the position. So if you split that between Tracy and Singletary, you'll max out at 7 points. I don't expect a touchdown. Only the weather is one silver lining. There is terrible weather in this game, and the wind might force the Giants' hand. They might have to hand it off like crazy. So that's the only saving grace, but Tracy and Singletary, I thought Tracy was going to be the guy, and Singletary ate into his volume. I have no idea what the touch split is going to look like. Odds are it's 50-50. No thank you in that scenario. So a good matchup looks like a terrible matchup lately, and even in bad weather, it's wasted. No thank you with the Giants running backs. Last player in this tier at running back would be Chuba Hubbard, my RB36. And last week, his volume completely cratered. They are back to a Rico Dowdle team once again. Can't blame them. Dowdle looks amazing, so Chuba appears to have lost his job. I don't trust him. The volume quickly went away from him. So the contract is good for him. At least he's getting paid, but he's not the guy you want. I would only trust Dowdle. No thanks. But against the Saints, there could be some garbage time that could save you. Maybe a fourth quarter touchdown, but without it, you'll get screwed. These next 3 players are the last 3 in the tier, and they're all wide receivers. I have Jakobi Meyers at Houston, who looks much more interesting now that Brian Thomas Jr. has been ruled out, but I actually still prefer Parker Washington. I think the odds that Meyers learns the playbook well enough to be amazing is pretty slim. And then against Houston, he could draw the Derek Stingley matchup. Even if he doesn't, it's a terrible matchup in general. The Texans are one of the worst matchups you could get. So in his first game with a new team, not going to start him at all. I have him in the same tier as Parker Washington, but at the position of wide receiver, 5 spots lower. And then overall in the flex rankings, I have him 11 spots lower. Parker Washington is at 69 and Meyers is at 80 overall. So no thanks. If you can start a Jags receiver, I'd go Parker Washington with more confidence, but I would rather fade both of them. The matchup against Houston is very scary. Jeudy has shown you no confidence to trust him. Dylan Gabriel does not throw it to wide receiver. So against the Jets, even without Sauce Gardner, the matchup got easier, but not easy enough. I'm not going to trust a Browns receiver. I think this is a heavy Quinshon Judkins game. And with Tillman coming back, it's possible that Tillman is more valuable than Jeudy. So no thank you with him. I don't trust Jeudy at all. I've faded him all year. That's been a very wise decision. And then at 82, I want to rank Darnell Mooney higher, but I just can't. He's been brutal. He's not been good. And while he is in the top 50 at receiver, with 4 teams on bye, with good receivers out, that is not really that valuable, in my opinion. So no thanks. I would bench him, but maybe Sauce Gardner does shut down Drake London enough where Penix has to look in his direction. I think Kyle Pitts will have a better game, though, than Darnell Mooney. The matchup is better for Kyle Pitts, but it is still solid. The Colts have been vulnerable. They've been a good spot for opposing wide receivers. Maybe, just maybe, Mooney will cash against Indy in Berlin. I doubt it, though. I'd rather bench him. But the next 13 players in this desperation tier, I'm definitely benching. But if you're in DFS, they become more appealing, especially for the sake of being unique. And I still think they will get some usage, but not enough consistency to trust. They are very rough bets in general. We got Olamide Zaccheaus versus the Giants, and last week his stat line should have gone to Roma Dunze, so odds are it goes in that direction again, but maybe he'll get another 8 targets. The Giants are a good matchup, but I don't want to trust him if I don't have to. I still think Burden is better than him, but hasn't been the case this year. Zaccheaus is the wide receiver 3 in Chicago. Christian Kirk is the wide receiver 2 in Houston, and last week he had 8 targets. That's his second game this year with 8 targets or more, and injuries have been a problem. I do think this matchup against Jacksonville is a good one, but without the volume, he'll definitely screw you over, and trusting Davis Mills feels a bit too gross to endorse. If it's not Nico Collins or Dalton Schultz, I'll pass on Christian Kirk. Michael Wilson did get involved last week, and I liked him coming out of college, but he never played well with Kyler. It looks like getting away from Kyler was all he needed. He was much more involved last week with Brissett. And maybe against Seattle, they really locked down Harrison enough where Brissett has to look to Michael Wilson. But not ready to trust him, just wanted to mention him as an interesting bench stash. Brissett's offense does look to be more valuable than Kyler's, and there will be some value with the Arizona wide receiver too. At this point, Michael Wilson, though, has been so gross overall in his career, it's hard to trust him. I'm not ready to endorse him, but he does crack my top 50 with 4 teams on bye. You could do worse than Michael Wilson. At wide receiver 50, player 86 overall, I do have Malik Washington, who is an interesting floor play, given the volume is kind of on lock in Miami, but not much upside. Tua doesn't throw touchdowns, and the volume isn't safe enough. He also offers some rushing value, and without those catches, that's a valuable half point that doesn't hit when he gets the ball. So kind of annoying, not much upside, needs a touchdown, and even with it, you might max out at like 9-8 points. So no thanks with Malik Washington, but maybe you're desperate enough where you'll consider him. And then these next two are running backs. Terrell Jennings at Tampa might get another vulture touchdown. It is possible, but against the Bucs, it's not a good spot, so I would avoid him. I only trust TreVeyon in that backfield, but maybe Vrabel gets him another touchdown. And then Bam Knight, I thought was a better play last week. I was dead wrong. It was DeMercado who you wanted, and maybe it pivots back to Bam Knight, but this week I'll favor DeMercado. I'd rather bench both of them, though. These next 3 players are wide receivers with a lot of risk. Keon Coleman has been dog shit since week 1, so not going to trust him. Odds are he gives you like 3-4 points, and even with a touchdown, you don't crack 10, so no thanks with him. But there's going to be a game where he offers that elite ceiling again. He still has value. In Buffalo, there's always upside, but no floor. Matthew Golden, I think, is losing his job to Christian Watson, so not going to trust him, but with no craft, there's a chance he steps up, but I'm ready to fade him and maybe even drop him. I don't think he's worth a roster spot too often, so that's not good. Kendrick Bourne looks like shit now that Kittle and Jauan are healthy, but he did have a great game against the Rams last time it happened, so maybe week 5 will repeat. Maybe he fucking torches the Rams again, but I would doubt it. He's been fading quickly. That week 5 game looks like a fluke. These next 4 players are running backs, and maybe you'll hope for a touchdown, but these backups are not safe at all. Nick Chubb is behind Woody Marks now, and the matchup is bad against Jacksonville, so no thanks. He's also questionable, not a lock to play, but limited in practice, I assume he'll be available. Tyler Algier against the Colts sometimes gets a touchdown, but in this game, I assume they're going to lean heavy on Bijan, so I doubt he steals his thunder. Bashal Tutin had a vulture touchdown last week, so it is a factor with him, but ETN is getting way too much volume. Tutin is still a big liability. Without a touchdown, you get nothing. And then Kenny Gainwell might have some valuable receptions this week, but I wouldn't trust him. I would fade him. That is the last player in this tier. So these last players remaining are only dart throws in DFS, but I will rank the top 110 overall. Let's just rip through the position. We got Isaac Tesla, who could score a touchdown. Love the matchup against Washington. I think Goff is going to have a great game. And we did have a no-name receiver last week, Cody White of the Seattle Seahawks, score an 80-yard house call. The Commanders are just so bad. Tesla could take advantage, but he'll probably only get like 2 or 3 targets if he doesn't find the end zone. He will screw you, and even if he does, you might max out at 1 catch for a 2-yard touchdown. That is worthless. Xavier Legette, way too boom bust. Sometimes he plays well, but it's so rare, so random. I'm not going to trust him. Calvin Austin did get some job security after Roman Wilson fumbled, but not going to trust him. The Chargers are a bottom 2 matchup this week, so no thanks there. But sometimes he has a big play touchdown waiting to happen. There is some upside, but no floor either. And then Xavier Hutchinson did have 5 targets last week with Davis Mills. Maybe the backup quarterback likes him, but I don't trust him at all. It's just the Jags matchup that's really good, so that's why he's on my radar. Brian Robinson Jr., I think, will play much worse given it's against the Rams. It's a very difficult matchup, but sometimes does factor in, so maybe you'll at least roster him. He is a valuable handcuff behind McCaffrey. Tank Bigsby, not going to get any value this week because Saquon's healthy, but did play well last time we saw him before the bye. Very efficient, so is the handcuff I'd rather roster the most. But behind Saquon, no starting value. Jerome Ford, no starting value, but could play well in garbage time against the Jets. The matchup's good, and maybe they dominate. So in the fourth quarter, might get some touches that do factor in. Blake Corum fumbled last time against the Niners, so his job is kind of gone. But sometimes he does get like 9 carries, and maybe he vultures a touchdown, but mainly just handcuff appeal if Kyren goes down. These next 3 are receivers, though. Cedric Tillman is back on the team, practicing, and is expected to play, but I don't trust Dylan Gabriel, and technically he's still on IR, so against the Jets, let's wait and see, but is on my radar, might be more valuable than Judy. I doubt it, though. I did rank Jack Betch in the top 60, but it looks like Tyler Lockett is the number 2 receiver you'd rather have behind Trey Tucker now that Myers is gone. And then lastly, wide receiver 60 is A.D. Mitchell at receiver versus Cleveland. Not a great matchup. Let's see what he does. But the Jets need bodies to run routes, and A.D. Mitchell was talented, was a second-round pick last year. I do think he'll be on the field immediately for the Jets. It's possible he does factor in, but probably not worth a pickup just on my radar. At wide receiver 60, not going to start him. There's just 4 teams on bye, and that's why he does crack the rankings. But last 4 players are all running backs, and no thanks. Just hoping for some handcuff value with Emmanuel Wilson. But Chris Brooks also factors in, so behind Josh Jacobs, that kind of sucks. Ray Davis and Ty Johnson might get some garbage time usage, but behind James Cook, neither has value. If Cook goes down, I'd rather have Ray Davis, though, so that's the only value in that backfield. And then lastly, Isaiah Davis does have some handcuff value behind Breece Hall, but no starting value whatsoever. So that is it for those rankings. These are my top 110 at both positions. Overall, we got the top 50 running backs on the screen and the top 60 wide receivers. I feel very confident in the top 40 players overall. The top 18 running backs all locks in your lineup, and the top 22 receivers also all locks in the lineup. If you have any of them, I can't imagine you have the depth to be benching them. There's 4 teams on bye and a lot of relevant wide receivers. Not as many running backs that factor in the top 20 generally, like just Javonte Williams. But at wide receiver, we have like 5 or 6 players that I generally would rank in the top 20. So not going to get too picky. If I have a solid floor play generally that's usually on my bench, but always offering like 8 to 10 points, I would just start them at flex. I would consider them good plays. So in the top 12, those guys are all locks. No chance you're benching the top 6 running backs or wide receivers. There is no argument you could make to tell me you're benching them. In the top 26, maybe there is an argument, but I would dismiss it. They're still high enough in terms of depth options where you have to start them. There's some good matchups for guys like Ladd and Keenan. Quinshon Judkins and Rico Dowdle should fucking dominate this week. And then obviously guys like those elite running backs and high-end receivers like Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown. They're all locks in the lineup. Let's not get cute. Let's start them in the top 26. But the top 40 are still in my lineup. There's a little bit higher risk and maybe not as much upside for them, but odds are they get the volume at receiver to cover you. Probably pretty bust proof. And then if you're betting on a touchdown, these are definitely the more likely names to actually find the end zone. So it might not happen with all of them. Some of them will just be high-end floor plays, but very bust proof options. They will finish in the top 40 respectively at wide receiver at the minimum, and then probably top 30 at running back. They're all probably worth a start if I rank them in the top 40. But in the top 54, those are my high-end flex options, and I still expect at least 10, 12 points for all of them. Between Kyle Monangai and Zach Charbonnet, I think all those running backs should be in your lineup, at least as a flex. I like the spot for Kyle Monangai. I still think he's going to be heavily involved. And then TreVeyon Henderson, David Montgomery should have decent chances at a touchdown. Some high upside for them, but a little bit of a low floor given their track record this season. But Jaylen Warren, Kimani Vidal are 2 of the safest starters you can find outside the top 20, so probably still just going to start them and bite the bullet. But then wide receivers I like in the top 30, all good floor plays. DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, both Bears receivers should be started. Same with Deebo. With no Terry, hard to fade him. WanDale gets a great matchup, but some weather factors in. Dobbs, not the best matchup, but should get more targets with no Tucker Kraft. And then Olave, Tet are very safe floor plays. Same with Khalil Shakir, but their matchups are a bit tough. So a little bit less appealing, a little bit concerning with some red flags, but you can't get too picky this week, and they are the best flex plays, in my opinion. The top 54 overall should be in your lineup, but 55 through 68, I think are more of the low end flex options. And at that point, you're getting a little bit more desperate and hoping for the best, but I still think I'd probably start them. They'll probably crack the 10-point threshold, and odds are they're in my lineup. If I am desperate with 4 teams on bye, you might be. So Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, still too talented to fully fade, but not good matchups for them. I don't think they're great starts, but in the top 30, I'll probably settle on them at running back. And then Kamara, I'm hopeful for. He plays well against the Panthers, but has played like shit this year, so not excited, but worth a shot. Jones has some pass catching value. DeMarcado played well last week, and Woody Marks is the RB1, but they feel really risky at the position. In general, I'd rather bench them if I could, but if I was forced to, I would just accept my fate with those running backs. But receivers still solid in this territory. We have guys like Josh Downs, Troy Franklin, Demario Douglas in good spots. I would like to see a touchdown, but the floor should be fine. The volume, I think, will carry you for at least like 7 targets this week. And then QJ, Addison, Shaheed, and Watson have high upside down the field, but no floor whatsoever. So high risk, high reward. Good luck with them. And then lastly, Trey Tucker was a bad call, but he is a starting receiver after all with no Surtain. I was willing to take my chances. But him right above the black line is a really good encapsulation of the risk-reward ratio rest of the way. There are some ugly names, and odds are you want to bench him, but maybe you're so desperate there is a chance you'll settle on those guys. But Parker Washington, Alec Pierce, Rashad Bateman, Tez Johnson, and Darius Slayton, I think are the most appealing beyond the top 68. Those guys I would rather bench, but I do see some value, do see some upside with all of them. There is a chance they give you a house call, but without it, you kind of get screwed. But RBs 31 through 36 are gross as fuck, and I would definitely bench them. Just, you might be forced to with 4 teams on bye. But Jordan Mason, JCM, Chris Rodriguez in too big of a timeshare to trust. Tracy and Singletary, a bad matchup. Also a timeshare, so no thanks there. Chuba has lost his job, so that looks gross as fuck. And then Myers in his first game with a new team, that feels risky against Houston. No thank you. Judy and Darnell Mooney has been dog shit. I can't trust him, but only outside the top 82 would you kind of get so desperate that you kind of don't care about the risk anymore. Guys like Zacchaeus, Christian Kirk, Michael Wilson, Malik Washington have been getting some volume lately, but really hard to trust. Terrell Jennings, Bam Knight, hoping for a vulture touchdown could happen, but odds are it doesn't. Keon, Matthew Golden, Kendrick Bourne, I think have lost your confidence in any safety net. Nick Chubb, Tyler Algier, Bashal Tootin, Kenny Gainwell, hoping for a vulture TD. Could happen, but odds are it does not. And then beyond Isaac Tesla, you are really playing with fire, just hoping for a touchdown. I'm not even going to mention them beyond Isaac Tesla. So that's it for the video. We went a bit longer this time, but I think it's worth it. We got a lot of information in this one and all of those start-sit decisions at Flex to make. So if you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. If you still have questions, let me know in the comments down below. And perhaps tomorrow I will be adding some tight ends in these flex rankings, but I can't guarantee it. I might just stick with what I normally do. At least on Friday, we rank flexes, and it's fun. I'm happy I've changed the schedule to include both running back and wide receiver in the same video. Anyways, let me know what you think down below. We're still hammering out all of the tweaks in this video. Maybe I'll split it into 2 parts. The must-start locks, and then the more questionable flex plays that maybe you'll be desperate enough to start. But that's it for me. My name is Adam Riancho. I'll see you next time. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.